Welcome back everyone. Today we're asking, what is the most mysterious / paranormal thing you've witnessed? If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscription button and the bell because I am doing these videos every single day. Scariest moment of my life happened while my friend and I were camping in eastern Canada as teenagers. We decided to sleep in this abandoned camper we found deep in a large forest that was near our town. It had been there so long that small trees had grown around it. We'd stumbled across it when we were exploring a few months back and thought it would be cool and brave to sleep there for a night. So, one weekend, we did it. We arrived after dark because we had gotten lost trying to find the camper. We had a really low power flashlight, so it made it even more difficult. Once we finally found it, we opened the rusty door and stepped in. The sound inside the camper was shrill and echoey. There were typical camper things strewn about: cups, empty cans, swollen pulp fiction novels. Already tired, we holed up in one end of the camper where the bed area had originally been before the cushions had rotted away to almost nothing. A long hallway stretched the length of the camper so we could basically see from end to end. It was a miserable night. There were several rats living in there. I saw them staring at us from a chewed out part of the ceiling. When the wind blew outside, the camper would shriek and groan. We even thought we heard a bear outside too, walking around. Still, we feigned bravery and acted like we were having a good time, but we were on edge. At some point I woke up from an uncomfortable sleep. I sat up to adjust myself when I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. At the other end of the camper there was a small window, and as I looked at it I saw a man's silhouette. He was clearly staring straight at me from outside. At first I thought maybe it was a weird shape of a tree or something, but when I moved a bit to get a better look, the person clearly reacted and then froze. My heart was pumping, and I woke up my friend immediately saying, "Someone is here," over and over and over in a whisper, not taking my eyes off his profile. He woke up immediately, and I nodded towards the window. He saw him too. We whispered frantically about who it could be and why he was staring at us. For the next 10 minutes, no joke, we stared him down. The longer we stared at him, the more frightened we got. Occasionally, he would move, but always keeping his eyes locked on us. Eventually I shouted at him, "Hey!" No reaction. My friend was braver than me and decided to shine the flashlight at him. As soon as he did, we realized our horrible mistake. It wasn't a window at all on the other side of the camper, it was a mirror. We had been staring down ourselves from the very start. Completely idiotic. Still, it was the most fearful, relieving and funny moment of my life that I'll never forget. Closest to paranormal I've ever been. I was so scared reading this. What a great ending. Yeah, that was a great story. I think that just because it turned out okay doesn't make it any less scary, right? You're still going to look back on that and be terrified. My father passed away last year. One item he always said he wanted me to have was a shotgun which had originally belonged to his grandfather. For years he had this shotgun stashed in the attic. After he passed, I had gone in the attic to look for it, only to find that it wasn't there. A few months later, I had a dream in which I was talking to him and I asked him where he had put the shotgun. He told me it was in the closet of a spare room. I called my mother and had her check, and sure enough, that's where it was. Now, it's completely possible that my father had told me that when he was alive and the dream was little more than a memory, but I certainly don't recall that being the case. It probably was. I met a friend at university, studied with her for 4 years. One night I had a dream that I bumped into her in a mall in Canada and she fell over. Surely enough, I had bumped into someone in a Westfield mall in Vancouver. It was real and I thought I had merely replaced that person I had bumped into with my friend. When I told her about it, she recalled the event and we found out that we actually bumped into each other on the other side of the world 3 years before we actually met in university. Weird, huh? That is weird. Not paranormal obviously, but yeah, weird. My mom told me this story the other day and it freaked me the f*** out. When my older sister was little, like 3, she asked my then pregnant aunt to pick her up to hold her. My mom said she was like, "She can't pick you up, honey, she has a baby in her tummy." And then my little sister was like, "That baby is dead." My mom freaked out, but my aunt and grandma were fine and were telling my mom it was all good. She was just a toddler and didn't know what she was saying. Well, lo and behold, my aunt goes to the doctor the next day for a routine pregnancy checkup and the baby was dead. Gives me the willies just thinking about it. That is mental. When I was 15, my mother and I were standing in the kitchen talking. There was a rack on the wall holding keys about 8 feet away. A key from the rack flew across the room and hit the floor near our feet. This is the only event in my life for which I have no explanation. A lot of people are asking what the key went to. I don't know. It was an old, heavy key. The house was built in the 1880s, so it could have been original to the house. Are you the keymaster? I saw a shadow person once. I don't know if that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, it had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and a living room on one side, and then a bathroom with 2 entrances. On the other side of the bathroom was a hallway that had windows in one side and 2 bedrooms on the other. From my bedroom, I could look across the hall into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser, and I just noticed movement at the corner of my eye and looked down there. There was, and honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just typing it, 17 years later, a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved. Like electricity arcing, that's the best way to describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember when I saw it. I wasn't afraid, just like, what the f***? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around, it just focused on me, I guess. Then I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen because it just fucking came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as I entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut on it. Then I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went the outside into the daylight and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw something supernatural, but I know I saw something. I don't know what it was. Okay, that one was terrifying. I literally got chills reading that. Ugh. Dude, when I was a kid, I saw the same thing that almost met your description. I was laying in my bed, the room door in front of me, wide open, and to the left. I could see the room where the front door was. There was an antique cabinet that my dad had that illuminated a white glow. I started to freak out for no reason and started sweating. I, for some reason, knew shit was about to happen and I was about to witness something. About 5 minutes later, laying hot in sweat, I saw it. There was a door in the back of the room with the front door that was storage. A black outline humanoid figure walks out, mildly static looking like you said. It takes a few steps towards the front door, then stops. There's a military-like turn facing me. At this point, I'm freaking the out and eyes wide. It walks into my room and stops beside my bed. There's one more military turn facing me. At that point, I figured, what have I got to lose? I noped the out of there and ran through the thing, ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom and knocked furiously at the door, waiting to let me in. Eyes focused on the stairs, making sure it wasn't to follow me. Nothing. I slept with my parents for the next few nights. One of the scariest things that happened to me as a child. I have a couple more different stories, but I'm at school right now and can't write them. If there's interest, I just might. A short time after the shadow people encounter, I began to settle down and my thoughts were no longer fearful. I also believe this was during the time I put up a dream catcher that my mother got me at the time. Let me just say, that dream catcher really did the job for years. Maybe because I truly believed in it and my mind worked in my favour. Anyway, I woke up one morning to Mum yelling down the stairs for me to get up. It was a school day. I had a shower, came back to my room and sat on my bed, sluggishly slipping my school uniform on. This is where the goes down. As I was pulling up my socks, I noticed a flash outside my door, more toward the room with the front door. Not the bright camera type flash, but more like an invisible person walking past super fast past my door. For those of you that played Halo, it looks something like walking around with the invisibility cloak, but real fast past my door. You can still see them, but not entirely. I saw this from the corner of my eye and began to freak out. I went upstairs to eat breakfast, and I remember how scared I was. I sat there staring down at the table as I ate my cereal. My mother asked me what was up, and I looked up at her with a straight face and said something along the lines of, "I saw a flash by the door downstairs. Something walked past my door." I said this calmly with a straight face, and now that I look back on this, I must have looked like the classic creepy kid. My mom replied with, "It's all in your head." I went back to eating, and she went in the laundry room behind the kitchen, and that's when it happened again. I was eating when I saw another flash of an invisible person walk past the kitchen door. This time, I was paralyzed, as in I stopped chewing and was now staring straight down at the table. These f***s are playing with me. My mum walks in, stops, sees my reaction, and again, I calmly say, "It just did it again. Over there," pointing at the kitchen threshold. I tell my mom, "Something is playing with me, and I'm not imagining things." What really relieved me, but freaked me out at the same time, was her reply, "I know." It relieved me because she believed me, but freaked me out because she basically confirmed their existence. About 10 seconds later, we both heard someone walking down the stairs, wooden, so creaking can be heard, very slowly. I remember thinking to myself that it sounded as if their cover is blown and they're trying to sneak out. My mum and I both looked at each other, and once we heard it stop, she looked around the corner down the stairs. Nothing. Dad had already left for work. What the actual f***? This story is set in the Philippines, where I've heard many stories from my relatives about paranormal things happening in the house we stayed at. This is something that I've experienced myself. This happened in the second story living room. This living room was huge, tall ceiling and about 20 feet by 45 feet worth of room. It was during Christmas time, and we had a tree set up in the middle of the room towards the north side, a large Jesus table on the east side positioned north-south. There was a television set up on the west side, with a large green velvet couch about 15 feet in front of the TV, and another couch set up sideways to the TV but backed up against a sliding door to the balcony. There was enough room for someone to walk behind the couch to get to the open screen doors to the balcony. Anyway, my Filipino cousins, I'm half Filipino, and I were gathered around the TV. Some of them on the floor, one of them on the back couch, and me on the couch by the sliding door. We were all watching either a game show or something overly bubbly. At this time, it was getting late for us, maybe 10 PM or so. Here's where the realest shit goes down. I'm sitting on the couch with my legs up and one knee up. Remote is dangling on the backrest edge to my right, and I hear it drop behind me. So little me, being the ninja I am, slides over the top of the couch on my back, like a bridge stretch for your back. With my face pressed up against the glass, I grab the remote, and from the corner of my eye, I see a little girl with black f***ing hair. She had a white dress on and was looking down so I couldn't see her face. She was in a crawling position, backing up like she had been caught and trying to escape. She was backing up towards the middle of the room, towards the Christmas tree. I was still upside down at this point, and when I managed to look over at her, she disappeared. I scuttled right back up and jumped. All my cousins looked at me like, what the fuck? I then explained to them what I saw, and they started basically shaking their fingers pointing at me, as if they know I must have done something to see something. They were smiling though, as if it's a normal thing. To this day, I still think that they were just messing with me with the whole, you got in trouble with the supernatural, but I know what I saw. I was always scared shitless whenever I was in the Philippines, especially that house. In the area we lived in, Betty's, this house was like a mansion. It was opposite some basketball courts, in case anyone knows Betty's. Anyway, if anyone ever goes to the Philippines, ask the locals for some supernatural stories. I'd imagine everyone there has experienced something, as all my Filipino relatives have, including our maids. One maid ran away once because of an encounter. She came back, and I'd met her before, and she hates talking about it. Nope. Done with this thread. My grandfather passed away just a few weeks after I was born. Never met the guy, never knew what he looked like. When I was 5 years old, I started to see this man in our rocking chair. I called him the rocking chair man. My parents thought that it was that imaginary friend stage, but it started to bug them when I told them every single day. They finally questioned me about it. I told them every detail I could remember, and finally they showed me a picture of a man. It was my grandfather. To this day, I'm 22 now, every time I dream, he's in the background somewhere. I remember when I dreamed about my high school graduation and I looked in the stands and I saw him with my parents. I like to think that he's just watching out for me and being there when he's not really there. So, I am a true believer of the paranormal. I attended the same university for my bachelor's and my PhD. There was a lovely woman by the name of Jennifer who was my reading in the content area instructor. The guys all swooned over her. She was gorgeous, and I loved her because she read us The Giver out loud. She was an awesome instructor and was doing her PhD in literacy. Fast forward a few years and Jen has moved to South Carolina to teach literacy. I'm now in my PhD program and in the same grad student office she used to work in with other literacy people that were her colleagues. And then we get the news that she was murdered by her boyfriend. Everyone is totally devastated. It was a huge blow to the department as she was genuinely loved by everyone who knew her. So, a few days after her funeral, her body was brought home. I'm in the office suite at school very early in the morning when nobody else was around. The grad students had a fishbowl office, 10 of us with group desks, within a larger office suite that was locked and had light motion sensors. I'm walking in and past a locked door with windows, and I see a woman with short, dark hair walk the other way inside, which was weird because the lights don't flicker on when she moved. So I walked around the corner to the door with a key code and let myself in. I walk inside and head to where I saw her. The lights flicker on when they sense me. Nobody is there. It's just me and an entire suite of empty offices. I swear to God, it was her, saying goodbye to a place she spent so many years in and where she had so many friends. It spooked the hell out of me, but made me sad too. About 20 years ago, my mom came out of the shower, pale, shaking, and hysterical. My aunt spoke to me, and she is here to pick someone up. I know she is talking about my father, she said to my dad and I. Her aunt has been dead for many years. 2 days later, my grandfather, Mom's father, was in the hospital. He was in a coma and died shortly after that from undetected lung cancer. I hear very often about dead family members appearing when someone in the family is going to die, to come get them. I'd like to see if anyone else has a similar story. Girlfriend's mom had cancer and dreamed of her grandma one night. I don't remember the type, but doctors gave her a 5% chance of survival. She said her grandma said something to the effect of, "I'm going to die so that you may live." And the next day, her mom called and said, "I have grave news." My girlfriend's mom said, "Don't tell me, grandma passed away." Her mom, "Yes, how did you know?" She survived and has been cancer-free for 20 years. Another story was with my girlfriend's sister. The family was going through a photo album and her sister pointed to a man and said, "That's Grandpa." Her mom asks, "Yes, but how do you know? You've never met him." Died before she was born. She replied, "He sits at the foot of my bed some nights and we talk." The f***. This is long, I apologise, but it is hard to express in TLDR form. I've also posted this before. I grew up in the Arctic. In the town I lived in, as long as it was a clear night, it was an extremely normal occurrence to see all sorts of strange lights move across the sky. Keep in mind the winter is long in the Arctic, which means longer amounts of time being spent under the stars. It's quite beautiful, as long as you don't mind the cold so much. Sometimes I would drive a snowmobile a few kilometers out of town, shut it down, and just lay down in the snow, looking up at the majesty of it all, the only thing disturbing the silence being the occasional breeze. The northern lights are also a common occurrence. Doesn't happen every day, but often enough that they start getting ignored after a while, as long as they aren't too spectacular anyway. On one particular night, without asking my parents, it was their snowmobile, I decided to go on one of my midnight drives out of town. I drove a few kilometers over the hills to find a spot devoid of light pollution from town, shut off the machine, and settled into a good spot to look up and be retrospective. It wasn't all that interesting a scene. A few satellites passing here and there, some relatively boring activity affecting the magnetic field, etc. And then I started noticing a clicking noise. At first I thought it was the sound of the snow machine cooling down, as engines expand and contract a lot in the cold. But the source of the sound definitely wasn't coming from that direction. My next thought was there must be an animal nearby, in which case I need to get out of there fast. You don't really want to mess with a wild animal. But the clicking is far too regular for an animal to produce it. It was fairly mechanical sounding. And again, the source of the sound isn't coming from anywhere around me laterally. It was coming from up, so naturally I look up, determined to ascertain the origin of this strange noise. I see what I always see. Stars, northern lights, a lazy satellite crossing the sky, all normal stuff. But before I dismiss it altogether and begin heading home, I noticed something strange in the aurora borealis. There were 3 rather strong points of light. I ignored them at first, thinking they were oddly symmetrical stars, but this proved false. They were definitely getting brighter. I kept staring in morbid fascination as they grew stronger and stronger, yet still only remaining single points in the sky. All the while the clicking noise is getting louder and louder and more pronounced, almost like someone started with tapping a pen on a desk to clacking billiard balls together inside my head. Then it stops. The lights are gone. The clicking is not heard, and aside from being a little stiff, cold, and rather petrified, I'm fine. So I jump back on the snowmobile thinking maybe I'm going crazy. The machine takes a little longer than usual to start up, and I'm beginning to worry. But soon it's running, and I'm heading back to town. As I'm driving back, several plausible scenarios as to what occurred are running through my head. I'm thinking it could have been a helicopter from the mine, or some strange northern lights behaviour, etc. Probably not that big a deal. I pull up to my house. Lights are all dark. Strange. It wasn't that late when I left. Open outer door as quietly as possible, remove winter gear, enter inner door. House is quiet. Really quiet. My parents are teachers and are usually up late marking or watching TV. All I'm thinking is I have to get to bed without anyone noticing. Proves to be easy as I'm soon under my covers. I go to set my alarm for the next day. All of a sudden, everything makes sense. Engine hard to start, stiff, rather chilly, nobody up when I was gone, what felt like relatively short period of time. It was almost 11 PM when I left, and now it was creeping up on 6 AM. I stood, staring at clicking lights for almost 7 hours. I never ended up sleeping that night, and I don't go on late night snow machine rides anymore. Missing time is always a fun concept to think about, and horribly petrifying as well. I like how there's no explanation for what happened there. That is the most terrifying part. There's nothing else that's said there. Wow. Alright guys, there are more stories to come for this one. There were so many stories that I've had to split into 2 parts, so keep an eye out for part 2 tomorrow, and we'll pick up where we left off.